Welcome to Envision More. Here, we dig deep into the insights of first-generation wealth builders, unearthing stories of passion, resilience, and relentless vision. Your host is Wagner Jr., founder of Visionary Wealth Management. So sit back and dig in. It's time to envision more.
Hey, this is Wayne Wagner, host of the Envision More podcast, and today I am joined by a good friend of mine, Chris Young. Chris is an estate planning attorney with Archer Greiner, where he works on high net worth and complex estate planning cases. Chris has been recognized as he's one of the top guys in New Jersey, probably the Northeast in this space. And Chris, thank you so much for being here. You and I end up as we're friends because of church, and our boys are good buddies. So we're kind of a couple of dads that got thrown together. But lots of respect for you and the professionalism and the work that you do with Archer Greiner. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you very much. You forgot our wives are pretty tied in with each other too. So
that is a fair point. So Robin and May run big events, and Robin was our daughter's kind of day of wedding planner for our daughter's wedding this past year, and helped us help navigate all of the speed bumps that go on one of the most stressful days a family goes through.
That's right. Yes, she's very good at that, no doubt.
Yep. So it's Robin's got this delicate, this super soft, delicate touch, even though it's like getting hit with a pool noodle that's got a piece of rebar in the middle of it. That it looks like it's soft, it's going to land soft, but man, it's going to get the job done and move you in the direction that you need to move. So,
and she'll do it with a smile on her face.
That's right. So that's great, good stuff. So Chris, can you maybe give us a little bit of background on yourself? Like what attracted you to estate planning? You've been doing this for more than a few years at this stage.
Yeah,
what attracted you to the space?
Yeah, I've been doing it for over 30 years. And when I went to law school, there's really two avenues that you can go down. You can go down the litigation avenue, or you can go down the transactional avenue. And litigation basically means you come into work and you fight with people all day long. And that didn't really appeal to me and my personality. So, I wanted to take the transactional route, which is more sitting down with people and helping them figure out things so that things can go well for their family. At times there's litigation involved with will contests, but most of the time you're just sitting down with people figuring out how to transfer wealth from one generation to another. So that was the avenue that I chose. I thought it would be the best one for me. So,
gotcha. Yeah, and now pick your head up 30 years later, and you're involved in all kinds of things over the years, and an equity owner at Archer and Greiner, and involved in really amazing stuff. I'm sure every day I'm sure every day is a new round of fascinating stories that you could tell.
Oh, I've got plenty of war stories out there that some of which I can tell, some of which I can't.
Sure.
We always talk in the office that we need to have our own TV series at one point, but we're not certain how much we could do with that. But we'd have plenty of topics that we could throw in there. It's never dull.
Yep.
But it's good. I can come into a situation where people have no idea how to move things forward, and I can give them direction. And that always, when they walk out of a meeting and say, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea that we could do this, and I feel so much better now." Sometimes it's just getting information to them, and it just makes them feel better. I'm sure you do that too, Wayne, with financial planning. People probably come into you with assets here, there, and everywhere, and you can kind of get them organized and sent in the right direction. So,
yeah.
So we kind of do similar things, you and I.
Yeah, I would agree, Chris. I think that you're handling the legal side of it. We're frequently handling the titling side of it. So it's always crucial that the estate planning attorney and the financial advisor be working together. I think there's increasing trend where their financial advisors are trying to in-house the estate planning by using AI tools and things like that. And I'm sure there's simpler situations and kind of for the lower end of the asset scale where some of that makes sense. But I think that as the assets grow and the complexity grows, I think that having a live estate planning attorney with years of experience or decades of experience to look at these situations and to help advise and counsel on these situations makes far more sense.
Yeah, I mean, AI is going to have its place in the future. I mean, we all see how quickly it cranks out summaries of things, but it's got a way to go. There have been a couple of court cases where attorneys have used AI, and AI actually cited in briefs to cases that didn't even exist. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, because it's not really thinking. All it's doing is putting things in print the way they should read. So it
Okay.
sees a spot here and says, "Oh, this is where the name of a case goes." So it just puts names in there with citation.
Hmm.
And you know, when it
That's
got to the
incredible.
judge and the law clerk looked at it, he said, "This case doesn't exist." So the
Wow.
attorneys actually got fined by the judge. It's got a way to go. It's got a way to go.
That sounds like the AI is operating as a bad salesman, just making stuff up as they go.
Sometimes, I mean, yeah, people have to realize it's not thinking; it's just organizing words in patterns
Mhm.
that have been used before. That's what it's doing.
Right.
So, uh, and it's going to get better and better at that. But right now, it's not there. It's not
Right.
there, not by a long shot.
Well, just so happens, as we're recording this past week, the CEO of Nvidia was doing an interview, and he said that he was asked, when is a viable quantum computing model really viable within what time frame? And he said 15 to 30 years, and all of the quantum computing stocks dropped by 40 to 50% that day because people are investing in these quantum computing companies thinking that there's going to be some kind of viable AI intelligence that matches human, cognition by next Thursday or something.
Right,
And
right.
and when a bit of reality sets in, suddenly all the air comes out of that section of the market.
Right. So
So
I feel, I mean, especially I've been doing this for 30 years. I don't think AI is going to take my job before I retire. Let's put it that way.
right, right,
Now, 20 years from now, it could be a different story. Yeah, I mean, they could put together complex documents very quickly and get them all right. There's still going to be some humans that are going to need to review things, though, because
yeah,
you don't want to end up in court and have to say to a judge, "Yeah, we just relied upon a computer to do this for us."
right,
And there's all kinds of mistakes. The judge says, "Well, that's really your fault. I can't.
yeah,
No one's going to sue AI for this. They're going to sue you."
that's right,
So we're going to need the human component, and just sitting
yeah,
across the table from people, personalizing things. You know that it's more than numbers. It's more than words. It's having a sensitivity for people in the situation they have, and sometimes it's the most difficult situations they have in their life. Either a parent is ill and about to go into a long-term care facility, or a parent has died, or a young child has died.
hmm
I've dealt with all of these things over the years. A lot of positive results, sometimes very sad, but we always point people in the right direction, and that's a good feeling.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and you mentioned kids that get sick and that kind of thing. I mean, there's a whole field of this space where we have a client who has a child with cystic fibrosis, and any small little cold can be a hospital visit or a long term emergency, and there's surgeries that go on, and it's the young man's in his 20s, and it's this will be a never ending situation for that family, and so there's the long term planning, the estate planning that has to be done to make sure that his needs are cared for even after mom and dad are gone, and caretaking for him and that kind of thing are all crucial. And the estate planning process is absolutely vital in that kind of situation.
I mean, you're 100% correct, because you can't leave things to a child in that situation for a number of
Right.
reasons. They might not be able to handle it personally, but more importantly, you might set them up to lose government benefits.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
one area where I have a particular specialty, and that's setting up special needs trusts for
Mm.
people who are in situations like that, where you can put your assets in trust for the benefit of your child who's in that situation and have them still continue to get government benefits and the benefits from the state that they're entitled to, and also have these assets available to pay for things that the government doesn't pay for. Um,
Right.
so, yeah, that's essential planning. That's
Yeah.
essential planning.
Yeah. And it's not 101 planning the way we think about things, because typical planning is, hey, you name your kids as the contingent beneficiaries on your 401k or retirement plan or on your life insurance and things like that. And like you said, you can't leave those assets outright to the child for a variety of reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
100% correct. Yeah. And we've had situations where that occurs, and um, you end up having to go to court in order to try and get things resolved. And it's never a perfect result in situations like that,
Hmm.
because then you have the state getting involved, because they see a basket of money there that someday they're going to be able to try to get, in order to reimburse themselves for money that they have paid on behalf of a child like that. And obviously, that's
Yeah.
not a good situation. Whereas if you do
Yeah.
proper planning with a special needs trust, you can avoid all those things.
Yeah.
So,
We're facing a situation like that with a client right now, where the special needs beneficiary has passed away, and we're kind of in a waiting period where the estate attorney has advised a kind of an 8 to 12 month cooling off period to just wait for Medicaid and that kind of thing to potentially come back and try to claw back assets. So
yeah, yeah. And you don't, if you have proper special needs trust set up, oh my, hold on a second. Of course, we have these ecological
yeah,
things here that are shutting lights off because I'm not moving enough.
right,
Just have
yeah,
to move.
that's right. You got to be more dynamic and talk with your
I
hands like
do.
an
Yeah,
Italian
move my
guy.
head around or something. Yeah, yeah. I blacked out on you there. Um, yeah, with we call it third party special needs trusts, which are set up by the parents themselves. And
Yeah.
those escape government involvement. Where you get messed up is if a child receives assets by mistake, and then you have to set up what's called a first party special needs trust, and that's the one where the state can get involved, because
Hmm.
with the first party special needs trust, that it is used for the child for their benefit for their lifetime. But upon their passing, the state comes back and can knock on the door and say, "Hey, you owe us money because we paid for it."
Hmm.
So
Right.
it's essential to do proper planning for children who have special needs, without a doubt.
Yeah. No, that's good. It's a good word. Chris, can you talk us through, maybe, if I'm walking in cold day one, just say, hey, Chris, nice to meet you. I need to set up an estate plan. What are the main documents if I don't have a complicating situation, or like with like a special needs child? What are the fundamental documents that I need out of the gate?
Everybody's going to walk out of my office with a will. Everybody needs a will, and they're going to walk out with a financial power of attorney, and that is to address a situation where you might become incapacitated and need somebody to do all the nitty gritty things for you on a daily basis, even something as simple as writing checks on your behalf or signing your income tax returns. So you'll have
Hmm.
that. And then the third thing you'll have is healthcare power of attorney, where you can name somebody to act on your behalf with regard to healthcare decisions if you cannot do that on your own. And that's something that's very important, because you get to choose who's going to do those things, rather than having family members in the hospital saying, no, well, you need to listen to me and you need to listen to me. You choose the person who you want to be able to interact with physicians when you can't speak for yourself. So
Right.
those are the three essential things. And very often we also end up with a trust situation, um, either for, if the couple has minor children, to address that, or to address potential death taxes. So
Yeah.
it's either 3 or 4 documents that you'll walk out of here with.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, and the trust. I mean, obviously, there's a bunch of different iterations of that. Um, I think that one of the challenges we see is that social media makes things, um, seem overly simple. And so you'll turn on social media and sometimes you'll say, oh, well, you need a trust and that'll help you avoid taxes, and and you won't have to pay income taxes and things like that. And those are most of that stuff is garbage
You're
because
right.
we
You're
see
right.
it. Yeah,
People
we
come
see
people people come into my office all the time and say I need a living trust because that's what they see on social media, that's what they see online. And in some states like Florida and California, it does make sense. A living trust is basically putting your assets in a trust while you're alive. That's a living
Right.
trust. And in some states it makes sense to do that. Florida, California, because those states actually take money out of your estate. Um, Versus if it's in a trust, they can't get to it. But New Jersey
Mm.
is not one of those states. New Jersey has a very simple process. And in fact, attorneys who have recommended putting assets in a living trust in New Jersey have been brought up on ethics charges because it's just a moneymaker for the attorneys,
Mm.
and it's not necessary at all. Probate in New Jersey is basically a 15-minute process, very simple, very straightforward. And so a living trust just to avoid probate in New Jersey is not necessary. The
Mhm.
times you're going to need trust potentially are if you have minor children and you need to have assets held in trust for them until a certain age or ages, or there's some situations where it can be used to help avoid death taxes. And with death taxes right now, um, New Jersey doesn't have its own estate tax anymore. They used to. And on the federal level, to be honest, the exemptions right now are extremely high. You're looking
Right.
for a husband or wife, they each get around a $13 million exemption. So if you combine those exemptions, you're looking at $26 million, which, that's not most people. Obviously, it's not.
Right.
Now
Right.
we deal with a lot of clients in that arena. We're fortunate to do that because of the size of our firm. But for most people, that's not going to happen. Um,
Yeah. Well, in situations where that is happening, where you are over 26 million, frequently there's much more complication than just the fact that just the issue of the net worth itself. It's how the net worth is structured, because the net worth is frequently in real estate or value in a family business or things like that that are not, it's not like, somebody's sitting on $50 million of cash and liquid securities. Am I right on that?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest problems for business owners when both mom and dad pass away is lack of liquidity.
Yeah.
Because if you do have assets that are over 26 million, and it's all tied up in a business, well, the IRS wants to be paid its federal estate tax, which is basically 40% of the amount over 26 million. They want to
Right.
be paid within 9 months of date of death. So
Hmm.
you could basically run into a fire sale situation for a business, which is not what anybody wants.
Yeah. I, I'm kind of a pragmatist on these things, and I, tell clients that are in those situations that there's two really simple ways to handle this. One is to buy enough life insurance and an irrevocable life insurance trust to prepay the estate taxes with cash today, in terms of premiums. The other one is to set up a donor advised fund and donate everything over 26 million into a donor advised fund as a charitable entity, so that it doesn't get taxed. And so those are kind of a poor man's pragmatic way of handling these things, but those things still have to be set up and I's dotted and T's crossed with the estate attorneys.
Yeah, I mean, those two areas that you mentioned, irrevocable life insurance trust and the donor advised. I mean, that's beautiful planning right there because you can walk away from it with your heirs receiving everything free from death taxes and still benefiting charity at the same time. And you can leave your family in charge of the donor advised fund, which is
Right.
great because it allows them to be thinking about charitable things when mom and dad are gone. So it's a beautiful situation. I mean, when we have people who are charitable minded, it's really a no brainer to do something like that. Nobody wants to pay taxes to the government, so that is essential planning for somebody in that situation, provided they're charitable minded. If they're not, then we'll typically try to go with just the irrevocable trust as much
Hmm.
as we can, so that the children have some liquidity when mom and dad are gone, because they're going to need it.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And I mean, to your point, if the family is charitably inclined, there's a pragmatic side to say, hey, you can retain control of the assets, but they've got to be sitting in a donor advised fund. But I mean, we have clients that we have one client that runs 100-year-old family business, and frankly, they've been so generous over time because they're in a relatively small town, and every time there's the local Boy Scout troop or the local church auxiliary or every charity in the area comes knocking on their door, and they've been writing checks literally for 100 years in their family history. And so there's like I'm not as not real interested in leaving a big chunk of the family assets at death, because literally we've been doing this for 100 years, in spits and spurts, in smaller amounts. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, wealth transfer with the closely held family business it's difficult planning. You have to be very careful with that. Oftentimes, you run into a situation where there might just be one child who wants to continue to be involved in the business,
right,
and there's a couple other children who don't. So
yeah,
you have to figure out a way to transition the business to the one child, while at the same time making the other children whole, because that happens quite a bit. So
yeah,
that's another
yeah,
aspect of planning that insurance can help with that. Um,
hmm,
there's other ways to do it too, so that the child who ends up with the business can end up in essence, paying the other children off over time after mom and dad are gone, in order to make them whole for the
right,
business that the one child received. So
yeah. Yeah, and we always talk with clients that are in those kinds of situations about situation like if you've got three kids, but one of them's going to run the business when you're gone. Well, then if you leave it equally to the three kids, well, now the daughter who's running the business is now in business with her brother and her sister, who have no interest in the business, but they sure want to collect 1/3 of the profits after mom and dad are gone. And then God forbid one of them pass away, now you're in business with your brother-in-law or sister-in-law, um, and whatever their values are, and they're showing up and looking for a paycheck too, and the complications and infighting that can go on in those kinds of situations is just a disaster for everybody. And
it is, yeah. But the good news is there's ways to address it. I wouldn't say that all the ways are perfect, but we can make them as good as they can be, depending
yeah,
upon the circumstances. I mean, it, the younger you are in a situation like that, when you're dealing with a closely held business, the better off the planning can be.
hmm,
If two 80-year-olds walk in and want to transition their business to the next generation, that's a little more difficult.
hmm,
Um, but it can still be done with proper planning. It can be done.
right. No,
Best to get started with the planning as soon as you can. It just gives you a lot more options and opportunity.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it's options and opportunity in every area. So things think about this. Now, I don't, most of us, and frankly, most of our high net worth clients don't love insurance products. But
No, of course
if
they don't.
yeah, we don't love paying insurance.
Nobody likes to pay auto insurance premiums either. But if you get in a car accident, you're glad that you have it. Well, that's the
That's right.
same way I look at life insurance too. Nobody wants to pay life insurance premiums, but you know what? When mom and dad are gone and the children have um, liquidity to be able to deal with not only taxes but also business issues, now that mom and dad are gone, it works out great. It works out
Yeah.
great. So what we tell people is, look, if you can do something like this and not have it affect your current or future lifestyle, and most people in that situation can do it, They have assets that they're never going to touch while they're alive. There's just this basket of assets that's sitting there invested, but they're never going to touch it. So we say, look, here's this basket of assets that you don't need, you're never going to need. So why don't we put it to work in an insurance product in a way that works and will not affect your current and future lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, dealing with that, trying to get, if we need to buy an insurance product, it's way easier to get that product underwritten, and it's way cheaper to buy if you're in your 50s doing your planning instead of in your 80s.
100%.
And and it's we can solve the problems. I couched it to a client this way. I said, listen, you've got an estate tax problem. At the end of the day, I want you to hire me for he absolutely hated insurance. I said, listen, you're going to hire me for $200,000 a year until you die. And you're going to write me a check for $200,000 every year. And I have one job. My job is to write a check for enough money to cover your estate taxes when you're gone. So don't think of it as, if it helps you think about it, this way easier. Don't think about it as paying an insurance premium. Think about it as hiring an employee to do one thing, and that's pay your estate taxes when you're dead.
That's great. That's a great analogy. That's great, and it's easy to understand. And you know what, Wayne? I'm going to steal that analogy.
Chris, how do we? Because we have kids that will have, maybe they have different values than us. Whether it's, we all talk about, our kids never, our kids and grandkids never seem to work as hard as we did, which is not, I don't think that's necessarily true for you and I personally, but we talk about the younger generation not working as hard and those kinds of things. But when there's money being passed to the next generation, how do we protect our kids, either protect them from themselves and doing damage to themselves, or harm to themselves, or just wasting money? Or there, I think this is probably where things like trust come into play and that kind of thing. But from your experience, what's some advice you might have on some of that?
Yeah, for families that, or even families that don't have significant wealth, there are times when you have a child who is in a difficult spot in their life, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head, Wayne. And you have to, for those situations, you have to put things in the trust for their benefit. And that doesn't mean the child's not going to be able to get the assets that are in the trust, but what you do is you put a trustee in charge of the money that's in the trust, and they can distribute the money to the child in the trustee's absolute discretion, if needed, for the child's typical standards are health, maintenance, support, and education. So it protects the child from themselves, in essence. Another time we see that happening is where there might be a situation where there is you see one child is having difficulty in marriage. So if you leave a lot of assets to that child, the assets that you leave them might end up in divorce court, which obviously you don't want. So if you leave assets in trust for that child, you can even name the child as the trustee of that trust, then it can't typically be touched in a divorce situation. So those are a couple of ways that trust for children can be utilized to protect the child. I mean, that in essence is what you're doing. One important part of that is obviously choosing the proper trustee, and sometimes that is an individual within the family who is mature and has the knowledge that they know to be able to go and consult with a financial advisor to learn how to invest the assets in the trust. But sometimes you run into situations where a child says, you know what, I don't want to be the one who is standing in the way of my brother getting money. That's going to put me in a very difficult situation. So in those situations, you might go with some type of, a corporate fiduciary, corporate trustee, or someone outside the family who you trust would be able to
Right.
handle things in those situations for the benefit of your child. It just makes things easier from a family dynamic.
Yeah. And when you're hiring somebody outside the family, it's sometimes, people are afraid to have a friend or somebody in their extended sphere involved. But I think it's important to remember that you're not asking this person to just voluntarily, benevolently do this work out of the goodness of their heart. As a trustee, they're entitled to trustee fees,
That's
so they can
correct.
be compensated
Yeah.
for doing that work as well, right?
Right, right. And the fees in New Jersey are set by statute. And I would say they're fair fees. They're not going to make the trustee wealthy off your money. That's not going to
Right.
happen. But it
Yeah.
is fair because the trustee does have to do work and they are taking on responsibility. So it is fair that they be compensated. And I think New Jersey has set up their statutes in a good way so that people feel that they're being fairly compensated. That's what should happen. So
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good perspective. Um, a couple other areas, Chris. I mean, if you're in a family situation, and I'll kind of tie these two questions together. But I mean, there's the stereotypical situation of like dad's 93 and suddenly he's got a 26-year-old girlfriend. He wants to change his estate plan and leave it all to her. And there's in my sphere as a financial advisor, there's a lot of work done on or and education for the advisors done on issues of elder abuse where and frequently it's when a child is taking advantage of mom or dad and talking them into wasting money or spending their money on the maintenance of the child and that kind of thing. But how do the other professionals, whether it's the estate attorney, the CPA, the financial advisor, in your mind, do you have any advice for professionals in this space or for family members who are maybe seeing mom and dad getting taken advantage of, for how to step in? What are some resources or steps that can be taken?
well, number one, if you have an elderly parent and it looks like they're going to marry somebody wealthy parent and it looks like they're going to marry somebody younger than them who does not have assets, 100% you have to get a prenuptial agreement because that will lay out exactly what's going to happen when the parent passes away. So that is essential. I'll just tell you a brief war story about that. We had that situation where a gentleman was getting married, and we said, "You need to sign a prenup. You need to sign a prenup." Over and over again, we said it, and it never got done. And unfortunately, on the day of his wedding, he went out on the dance floor and was having a good time, had a heart attack, and passed away with no prenup in place.
Oh my gosh.
So that's a very drastic situation, but
Yeah. Yeah.
the prenup solves it. Some people don't like prenups, but you know what? If they don't like prenups, that might be more of a reason to have one.
Hmm.
So that's essential. As far as people trying to take advantage of the elderly, that's a huge problem. Um, and that's why the documents we talked about before, power of attorney and the healthcare financial power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney are
Yeah.
very important because that gives the child some authority to deal with the situation. A power of attorney in New Jersey also allows you to appoint a guardian. So if you think your parent and the parent chooses who the guardian is, and that'll typically be a child. So if you think the parent is being taken advantage of and that they're starting to have dementia or advanced dementia, you could always go to court and seek to be appointed as their guardian, and um, and then you can put a stop to it. Short of that, though, I mean, if there's a lot of times where it's borderline, and those are the most dangerous times where it's not 100% clear that mom or dad are incapacitated. Very difficult. And if you think there are situations where actual abuse, and meaning physical or financial abuse, are happening in New Jersey, and I'm sure in other states too, you can do a confidential phone call to a government agency called the Adult Protective Services, And
Mm.
what they will do is they will go in and assess the situation and decide whether elder abuse is indeed occurring. And more and more, there's just the states are putting in place statutes that require banks, financial planners, because you see it. I mean, you see it if you know it stands out if somebody all of a sudden they're spending a wild amount of money, and as a
Yeah.
financial planner, you see it. And I don't know whether you have the obligation yet, but I know that banks now have the obligation that if that occurs, then they are supposed to contact Adult Protective Services to do an investigation. And I think
Yeah.
we're going to see more and more of that into the future because it's just too easy to take advantage of somebody who's elderly. They're easily
Yeah.
swayed and they're
Yeah,
easily.
we as financial advisors absolutely have that responsibility today.
Okay.
And in fact, there was a big firm that was just fined a few $1 million over failures in this specific area because there was, a situation, an unfortunate situation where there was abuse going on by it was one of those situations where it was a young lover. And a lot of money got spent completely out of character and out of pattern for the client, and the estate was severely depleted because of it. And when they did the investigation post mortem, they identified that this was a pattern that had gone on that the financial advisor had done nothing about.
Yeah,
So
with something like it's very difficult with something like that because sometimes the parent will say to the child, "Leave me alone."
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
that's hard. That's hard when
yeah,
that occurs. But
yeah,
you have to try and get yourself in there if you think that abuse is really occurring with somebody who has diminished capacity. You just
yeah,
need to try and get involved in any way that you can. Get yourself inserted into their financial matters as aggressively as you can in order to
yeah,
protect them. That's what you're doing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's always. I mean, we use this word, we throw around this word like abuse, elder abuse. A better way of thinking about it might be elder manipulation of where there's somebody who is outside the family has injected themselves into the conversation, and maybe somebody inside the family. I had a situation a number of years ago now where it was a daughter and a son, and the daughter was just nickel and diming mom to death. And mom didn't mom's assets were dwindling, and it was never $10,000 or $20,000 or $100,000. Mom was of limited means, and it was a couple of $100 here, $500 there, $700 there. And after about 6 months of this going on, I called mom and said, "Hey, listen, what is going on?" And he said, you've called up far more frequently for cash flow and that kind of stuff. And I was able to, mom said, "Hey, listen, my daughter, is this is going on, and she's got needs and this kind of thing." And I called the brother, and I had permission to do that from the mom. And I called the brother, and the brother was able to step in and kind of put a stop to it. But it's in that situation, it was within the family, and it was actually eroding mom's assets. So
Yeah, and that situation, rather than the second marriage situation, that situation, meaning children within the family, is much more likely to occur. We have a whole group here. That's all they do is disputes between children, whether it's will contests or otherwise,
mm,
disputes between family and a second spouse. That's all they do, and they
yeah,
are swamped with work. Um, so it's happening. It's happening,
yeah,
and my advice is if it's happening, try to get as heavily involved with mom or dad's situation as you can. And there are ways to do that. There are ways to do that. But you need to insert yourself and don't take no for an answer if you think that mom and dad are really being taken advantage of.
yeah. Yeah, we encourage our clients to have discussions with their kids, and and we ask for permission to speak with their children as a trusted contact in case we see anything that's going awry. And I mean, on the financial advisor side, it could be manipulation through current spending. It could be something more subtle, like the change of a beneficiary.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
So it's suddenly the beneficiary on an IRA or a life insurance policy or something like that, transfer on death designation on a brokerage account, suddenly gets changed. And so, I think mom and dad having open dialogue with their kids, and they don't have to tell the kids exactly how much.
Not again.
So exactly, they don't have to tell the kids exactly. Yeah. So they don't have to tell the kids exactly how much they're talking about, but just making sure the kids are aware of who the beneficiaries are on accounts and things like that. And then speaking with your financial advisor and giving the financial advisor the permission as a trusted contact person to be able to speak and communicate with your kids, so that God forbid there is ever a situation in the future where you're being manipulated or you're being taken advantage of, the financial advisor can reach out to your kids and have that conversation on your behalf, because you may not be thinking about things with a clear head at that stage.
Yeah, I mean, it's, to me, the manipulation of an elderly person is just horrible, and you can see it, it. As soon as somebody walks into our office and lays out the facts and circumstances, you can see whether it's occurring or not. And you, as a financial planner, can clearly see it too. If all of a sudden, like you said, there's odd things happening within the portfolio that have never happened before, then your antennas to get raised, and it has to be dealt with.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we see that stuff. We see that stuff today, even with theft of personal information and that kind of thing. Another big financial firm paid a big fine because like a financial advisor had retired, and the firm had assigned the client to a junior advisor or a younger advisor. That advisor had never met with this client, but the client sent emails in requesting distributions of cash. Well, their email account had been hacked and their bank account had been hacked. And over a course of like a year and a half, there were a couple dozen transactions totaling more than $1 million that had been requested. And so at some point, the elderly client finally got wise to something was going on and called the financial advisor. And the financial advisor said, "Well, we've got the emails right here." Well, the policy in the industry is that you don't need just something in writing. You need to actually physically speak with the client before you're making distributions to them.
Right.
And so, there was a pattern of breaching that policy of not contacting the client. Not in that situation, it was egregious because the advisor that was in charge of the account had never met with the client.
Right.
And so, and so they had, just taken these emails at face value and acted on them completely out of firm guidelines and industry guidelines. So, but,
yeah. I mean, I think it's going to get more stringent too. Which, I mean, from our perspective, sometimes we say, "Wow, I mean, this is not the good old days where you could just contact somebody and talk with them about anything." Now there's so many safeguards up that it makes it more difficult sometimes for us to do our jobs as far as transferring assets after people pass away, etc. But it has to occur.
Yeah. And I mean, and nobody's immune to it. We've had 4 or 5 emails over the years requesting money. And there's usually something in the email that's highly suspicious. Hey, I'm out of contact. I can't answer my phone right now, but hey, can you get me for $30,000? And I need you to send it to a different checking account because I'm out of the country or something. Usually there's something highly suspicious, and those are the ones that you just pick up the phone and call the client. Say, hey, Chris, is this you? Nope, not me.
Yeah.
Great. We're gonna delete this and report.
I mean, look. I mean, we're talking about these things, but 95% of the people come into the office. They're a good family. They have good children, and everybody's on board. And you just need to set up the plan so that the assets are going to flow from one generation to the next as easily and as beneficially as possible. That's 95%. The 5%, unfortunately for what I do, the 5%, they end up taking a lot of time, and a lot of times they end up in litigation. We call it, when mom and dad are gone, we call it divorce among family members, because a lot of times they don't like each other, and they will fight. Yeah. They will fight to the end just because they don't like each other, and they'll spend enormous amounts of money to do it. But 95% of the matters that that I handle are what I wanted to do when I came out of law school. They're transactional. They're just helping people with their transactions when they pass away, when they're alive and when they pass away. So that's the good news. I get to help people like that every day. I'm not dealing with elder abuse every day, thankfully.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure you have that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 95+% of the time, we have great relationships with the clients. We get introduced to their kids. We work with multiple generations of the same family, and it's a blessing, and it's a privilege, and it's a joy to get up and go to work and to work with these folks. And then, every once in a while you come across a situation, and you're right. It puts relationships at risk, especially if I'm trying to inject myself and try to protect an older client or that kind of thing, because it puts the relationship with the client at risk. It jeopardizes our ability to work with sometimes the second generation and those kinds of things. But that's the job. At the end of the day, the job is to act in the best interest of the client, even when sometimes that means confronting the client with something that's that's not in their best interest, that's going on outside our regular purview.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. The good outweighs the bad.
For sure.
With what we do. And I'm very happy about that, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, what's the best way, if we've got listeners on this podcast who are needing, specifically in New Jersey, but I assume Archer Greiner has representation in many states, especially on the East Coast, but what's the best way for folks to reach out and connect with you?
Well, they can either call me on my direct work line, or they can email me. Either one of those ways is perfect. So
okay, great. And your contacts available on the Archer and Greiner website, I assume?
Yes. It's Archer Law. That's one word, ARCHERLAW.com. And I am on there. I don't promise to have the best picture on there, but I am on there. So you can find my phone number and my email address. So
there you go. There's an old, I'll do one throwaway nod to Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn was the guy who, the motivational speaker, he was a mentor to people like Tony Robbins. But if you looked in the back of Jim Rohn's books, it literally looked like he had a crossed eye and his hair was a little messed up. And he said, listen, people take glamour shots and put them on the back of their book, and they show up and they're like, ooh, man, what happened to that guy?
Yeah.
And he just said, I put the worst picture I could find of mine on the back of the book or on the website. So when I show up, I'm better than advertised. I want to outperform expectations.
Then I'll claim that for my picture too.
There you go. Show up better than a picture on the website.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your generosity and sharing your expertise with us. Really appreciate it. And
my pleasure. You are the man when it comes to what you do. 100%. You're extremely trustworthy, honest, and above everything in your industry. That is what I treasure the most. You need to find somebody who you trust and is going to do right by you. And I know that when I refer clients to you, that is what's going to occur.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for that word of encouragement, and we wish you and your family a great winter, because we're recording this in January 2025 in the middle of this cold snap in the U.S. So
yes, we are. All right. Thanks again, Wayne.
Thanks, Chris. We'll see you.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Envision More podcast with Wayne Wagner Jr. of Visionary Wealth Management. We hope you were encouraged and inspired by the conversation today. If you want to dig deeper into the show notes or Wayne's work at Visionary, you can find us at envisionmore.com. That's Envision with a Z. Advisory services are provided through Wealth Plan Investment Management. Wealth Plan Investment Management and Visionary Wealth Management are separate entities. The content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Thanks for listening.